All right, here we go. Welcome back to the Gill Athletics Connections Podcast, episode 211. I'm quite amazed, actually, 211. And you guys and gals are still out there listening. So I'm really impressed by you because these are not easy to listen to. We're going to be, with today's guest, I imagine we're probably going to be 5-6 hours today easily. I know there's enough topic here to go that far. But in reality, we're probably going to be our hour and a half, hour and 45. We'll see. Help me welcome. This is really interesting. You've already seen the name and I always put the school name right after our guest, and you've already seen Elevate Athletic Recruiting, and you might wonder athlete recruiting. You might wonder, well, what? I don't know that school. What in the world is that? We're going to find out today and more. Help me welcome from Elevate Athlete Recruiting, the wise, the wonderful Miss Brooke Rasnick. Brooke, how are you?
Great. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, I'm excited about this for several reasons. First of all, I've known you for quite a while and have always been impressed. Just you as a person, first of all. Second of all, everywhere you've gone, amazing performances. You're an absolutely phenomenal coach. But now, and we're not going to get into it because I want to wait until the end. You're going to have to listen to the end of this broadcast to get to the unbelievable thing that she's doing now. But what you're doing today is unique, and I love uniqueness. So I'm really excited to dive into that when we get there as well. I hope you're ready to spill the beans and let us know what's going on. Is that cool today?
Yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, Brooke, let's get in our Wayback Machine here. At some point, assuming you were an athlete, I think I do know that you were an athlete, but at some point, somewhere, the act of coaching had to switch in your head. It had to go from something that was done to you, Brooke, go run this, lift this, throw this, to, oh, wait a minute, I could be a coach. Like that actually could be a career of mine. Where does coaching for track and field begin for you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So when I was a kid, I was an athlete. I played all different sports. I was, softball, played little league baseball, football. I wrestled, basketball, like you name it, volleyball, golf, tennis. Anything that I could do as a kid, I was involved with. And so going through high school and kind of narrowing in on my sports, I played volleyball, basketball, and actually softball my first 2 years of high school. So I didn't even start track till my junior year. Outdoor season, I was from Kansas. Indoor track really wasn't a thing, back then. So, and going to college, I didn't really know what I wanted to major in. I wasn't sure, but I loved athletics, and that's kind of, I was like, well, maybe I'd want to be a coach. And so if I want to be a coach, like I should get an education degree so I can teach, have, my schedule set up so I can coach as well. So I went to college, with that kind of mindset, and I have a math education degree, and it's funny because when I went to college, I felt like, high school age is like a really impactful age for people. And so that's why I want to, coach high schoolers so I can make an impact. And then I went to college, and my college coaches had a significant impact on my life. And so then you're realizing, oh, wow, like you can still change, and, there's a lot of influence there. And so, I had a great experience. I went to Wichita State, and then my college coaches, seemed like they really loved what they were doing, enjoyed their careers. And that's kind of when I had the thought of maybe I want to be a college coach.
So let's pause on college, because you did have some pretty special coaches there at Wichita State, and I wanted to make sure we touched on that. But before that, go back to high school. I didn't know. I mean, you're so track to me. I mean, like your DNA is track and field. I am shocked. You only did track your last 2 years. And you did softball, which is during the track season, at least, in the states I've been in. What made you switch, and what events did you kind of pour into?
Yeah. So when I was in middle school, in middle school, the only sport there was in the spring was track and field. So I did track in the spring, and pole vault wasn't an event for girls yet then. But my high school coach knew that it was going to be a sport. And so he kind of pushed me to it. My dad was a pole vaulter. My brother pole vaulted. So I would go pole vault with the boys at practice, and they let me compete at some of the meets. But I was really big into softball. That was probably my favorite sport growing up. But I'm a left-handed middle infielder. So from a small town, I could manage that, but
educate my non-softball brain. Why is that a bad thing? I always think of left-handers having an advantage. Like when I liked volleyball. So a left-hander volleyball, like it's hard to block them because you're always used to a right-hander. So you said left-hand. I thought, oh, that must mean you were really, really special. Like you could do some things, but you said it almost like a negative.
Yeah, so if you're playing second base or shortstop, to make the throw to first, you have to turn your body all the way around to make the throw. So it's like basically a non-existent thing that goes on.
True. Now that I think
So,
about that.
but I was from a small town, so I was one of the better athletes, so I was always in those positions typically. But to be able to compete against the college athletes, it was going to be a little bit more of a challenge. So I kind of knew that my career in softball is probably going to come to end in high school anyways. And my teammates from volleyball and basketball, they were track athletes. And then I had a guy that moved into town, Travis Weiss, that was a pole vaulter in college. And he knew that I messed around a little bit with it in middle school. And he kind of encouraged me to come out for track. And I was like the only returning starter on the softball team going into my junior year. Our track team was going to be good, had a chance to win state meet, which we ended up doing that. So I went out for track and ran the 4x1, the 4x4, and pole vaulted. And so that's kind of where it began. And I still played softball that summer, not really knowing. I kind of felt like I was a wannabe trackster. Those kids were really into it. And I had no idea. I'm used to softball. We're eating 2 hot dogs on the way to the dugout, in between games. And track was very different. So and then I started getting letters in the mail, really recruiting letters after my junior year. And then I thought, well, maybe track is what kind of my route is. I knew I wanted to be at the highest level I could be at. And I was a libero in volleyball, so I had some opportunities there. But track was where I could go Division I at.
Now, Brooke, we have to educate our listeners as well. Some of them already understand it. They know exactly where I'm going to go with this question, because it's 2023. And Brooke, you are a young person. I'm the old man here at 40, almost 47. In about a month and a half, I'm 47 years old, and that's still young. You said that girls didn't even do pole vault. Now, there's a lot of people listening right now that are like, oh, wait a minute, we always did pole vault. Like, everybody, what are you talking about? And it ain't like, I'm talking to an 80-year-old and it's like, back in the 1910s, we didn't have women's pole vault. No. You didn't have women's pole vault as a high schooler.
Yeah, just started. My freshman year in high school is when it started in the state of Kansas.
What year was that?
2000. I graduated in 2004. So,
2000. Yeah. That was yesterday. Yesterday, 2000. And we were just getting girls pole vault. That's crazy. In my mind, in today, in 2023, that is crazy. And we forget that women's pole vault, women's steeple, and women's hammer, at least on the Olympic level, we don't have hammer almost at all in the States outside of, doesn't start really till college. But they weren't even Olympic events until I think it was 96, 2000, and 2004, I think is what they kind of all came in at separate, I think, Olympics. That's just isn't that crazy? I mean, think about you and your career that you've had. Kind of do, if you think about that and think, oh yeah, I was like one of the first official girls pole vaulters in the state of Kansas. That's lunacy to me.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Wow. So what was it about? You mentioned Coach Weiss came in. He had pole vaulted in college. You also mentioned your dad and brother had vaulted. So you kind of had some DNA for vaulting, even though you weren't, air quotes here, allowed to vault.
No. And it was something, we were all multi-sport athletes. My dad was an all-state nose guard. He wrestled in college, and, my brother played baseball. So track was a really small portion of our athletic careers, but it kind of planted that seed, and got me interested in it. So I'm thankful for that.
Did you, I'm trying to put, I think representation matters, right? And I think of the little boys around the land that saw Jeff Hartwig vault and were like, oh my, I want to do that. And, today maybe they're watching Mondo. There's some 8-year-old seeing Mondo going, wait a minute. That kid looks like me. I could be that kid. I could jump 6 meters, or that kid's going to jump 7 meters one day. Who knows? So how did you, I know dad and brother vaulted, but you didn't really have any other girls or women to look at. Maybe Stacy DeGrillo. Wasn't she the only vaulter in the world?
Right. I remember watching Stacy DeGrillo on TV when I was a young girl. And I remember her having an interview and saying, if you want to do this sport, do it, So I remember that. But for me, for the most part, I was just used to being around the boys. That's what I was a huge tomboy. That was where I was comfortable. That's what I was a part of. I was a really competitive kid, and that's kind of what I clinged on to. So it wasn't a big deal to me to be one of the only girls doing it.
As I say, sounds like it didn't matter. There was other girls or not. It's like, well, I want to do this. I'm going to go do it.
You're right. Yeah.
That's cool. That's awesome. Well, so you had some choices. There were very few girl vaulters for colleges to make women vaulters out there. So you had probably some choices. Why did you select Wichita State?
Yeah. So I wanted to be at the Division I level. I was, if I'm gonna try to be the best I can be, like I want to compete against the best was kind of my mentality as a kid. And that was my best opportunity, to be honest. Like if Kansas State or Kansas, would have been kind of my ideal scenario, but they weren't interested. And
Right.
thankfully, Steve Rainbolt, the head coach of Wichita State, saw me competing at a regional meet, in Kansas, and as a junior. So I was I'd been pole vaulting, maybe 2 months of my life, and he actually saw me and said, "Man, that looks like Jenny Ashcroft, who was our pole vault coach at the time." And we obviously have a huge resemblance of each other. And so he, came over and said hi, which I don't think was legal at the time, but he bumped into me. That's kind of how it began. And I had no concept of how blessed I was that he saw me and that staff recruited me, and who Jenny Ashcroft was. Because I was still holding out, man. Like I wanted to be at the highest level possible, and hoping that Kansas State was interested, even though they weren't, and because I didn't commit until, the spring of my senior year. So
something tells me that's going to come into play later on in our story today. I am curious, before we get fully into Wichita State, you went to the state meet in Kansas, right? I've been there as well. I don't know if you knew this or not. So I coached over at Neosho County, Chinook, Kansas for a year. So I recruited and lived in Kansas. In Kansas, there's every state meet is special because that's the highest level there is, for 99% of the kids who run track, that's the highest they're going to ever get. And most don't even get to the state meet. There's a few states that just do it special. There's a culture around it. And Kansas is one of them. It's hosted right there at Wichita State. And it's like, if it's not it's one of the highest attended state meets as well. What was that like? I can't even imagine walking in and there's tens of thousands of people there to watch you
I think
vault.
It's normally about 40,000 people. They have 6 divisions in Kansas, and the state meets, everyone's at the same place, the same time. So it's just an electric atmosphere, so it's pretty awesome to be part of that.
40,000. You probably for quite some time in your career didn't either perform nor coach in front of 40,000. It probably took you a while. That's a special thing in our sport.
I probably haven't again until maybe, I don't even know if they're that many at the World Championships last summer, to be honest. So it's pretty phenomenal what they do there. So
what is it? Why? You have 6 classes. I get that. So there's a lot of kids there. So therefore a lot of families, but still 40. I would have told you that's the whole population of Kansas. So I'm just shocked that they could all get into one stadium.
Well, what else is there to do in Kansas but to go to a track meet? You know?
I live there, and that is true. That is very, very, very true. So you go to Wichita State, you become a math major, which, for a guy from Alabama, that's that's basically a PhD in Alabama. We don't do math very well down there. But you mentioned Steve Rainbolt, and, Coach Bolt is one of the most unique, and I mean that in all positive manners, friendliest, that you said that, you guys bumped into each other as a junior and he just said hi. And of course he did. That's just, he can't help but say hi, and never met a stranger type of person. Tell me about your college experience with him. And you've had there's other great people there at Wichita State. You mentioned Jenny. I don't know that I knew she was there at the time with you. That's another special person. Tell me about some of the coaches and how did they change you from an 18-year-old girl to a 22-year-old woman who's ready to go out and tackle the world.
Yeah, that staff is pretty amazing and unique in the sense that they're all still there, basically, So you've got John Hetzendorf, the throws coach, John Wise, he came when I was an athlete there, he's still there. Heidi Yost was on staff when I got there. Their jumps coach is still there. They've had a couple transitions, with the distance coach, and then Pat Wilson, who took over after Jenny left after my sophomore year, he was still on staff, and now he actually has brain cancer, so he's battling that right now. But if that wouldn't happen, for Rainbolt to keep that staff together at the mid-major level just shows you how impressive he is and how loyal they are to him. And it's just a phenomenal situation there.
Because go ahead. No, that's a good point that you brought up there about, because we've had conversations about, coaches and how long they, the tenure at a certain school. And honestly, we had a great conversation with Boo Schexnader on the podcast talking about that a little specifically. And he was very pro that, in the sense of, if, especially in the younger ages and stages of your career, if you have an opportunity to move on somewhere that's going to pay you more, take it, because we don't pay our coaches enough. And you're going to get to an age and stage one day where you want to retire. And if you didn't do the right things and get paid the right steps along the way, you aren't going to be able to retire. So he brought just a really unique perspective to that. But you brought that up about Rainbow, and he is a special person, and must be a phenomenal person to work for, because his staff tenure is very strong.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And a lot of that's, it's him that, the three coaches I just mentioned that have been there for over 15 years, they were all his athletes. So John Wise and John Hetzendorf were both his athletes at Kent State when he was there, and then Heidi Yost was a shocker when she was an athlete at Wichita State. So he just does a great job building relationships, and he empowers people and makes them feel valuable and encourages them. And you kind of feel like when you're around that guy, you feel like you can conquer the world.
Kind of do. Yeah. I feel like I can do everything except for golf, like 100 holes in a row or whatever he does for his birthday. And of course he does that. I mean, if anybody who's going to do it, it would be Bolt. Exactly. So we talked about this a little bit before we hit the record button. We were talking about representation. We were talking about women in coaching and women as athletes. Now you got to Wichita State and you had Jenny Ashcroft, another just phenomenal human being. Shame on me for not having her on the podcast yet to date. We're gonna, I've got to catch them all. So this is 200. We're gonna get there. If you're gonna have 1,000, someone has to be the 1,000th guest. Okay, we're gonna get there. Did that? I guess I'm gonna ask this awkwardly. Did that mean anything to you? That's an awkward way of asking the question. I hope you maybe get the gist of it.
Yeah. No, I think she was, it's interesting because I think, we grow up in our environments and you have these biases, and I had great female coaches in high school. My volleyball coach and basketball coach were really influential in who I was and developing me as an athlete and as a person. And then going to Wichita State and having Jenny Ashcroft, pour into me for 2 years. But I think I still had a bias of not knowing if female coaches were good at what they did, because there just weren't very many out there. I mean, I remember being a young coach at Kent State, and I'd go to meets, and if there was another female coach, in my first thought in my mind was like, I don't know if they know what they're doing. And here I am. I've had these female coaches that were awesome, right? I'm a female coach, right? And I'm arrogant. Like, I think I know what I'm doing, but that's like these biases that you grow up with, they impact how you think about things, and that's why, having that representation, talking about those things is important, I mean, I hate that I said that, but that's the reality of it. That was where I was at, just outside even having those great, influences that directly impacted me.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you overcame it, because I also thought I was better than every other coach. And you see, I haven't coached in 18 years now. So they quickly taught me who really was the good coaches, and I got out. So you've handled it much better. So you go through, did you do, I know you vaulted at Wichita State. Did you do any other events? I don't know if I thought of you as a multi for some reason, but that may
no, I messed around with the javelin just because our conference was weak in it, but not really. So I was pole vaulter. I wasn't anything else. Yeah. I would have loved to be a multi, but
I could have seen that. Maybe that's just like, I was like,
I love the mentality, but I didn't have the talent to back it up. So
I love it. So what was the first step out of college? You get a math degree. You thought about coaching high school, but you also have, and I have said this exact same quote, Brooke. So it's a little eerie that you said the exact same quote that I did. If I want to be the best, I have to beat the best. That was my whole coaching career. I was like, man, I want to be the best sprints, hurdles, jumps coach in the world. Well, then you better get to the SEC. And so my whole mission was to get there. And then I got there and I was like, oh boy, this is a tough division. I was like, this is pretty tough. And then I got out. So it tells you how tough I really am. So what was your first step? Did you go to coach high school? Did you go straight into college coaching? What'd you do?
Yeah, well, I was super fortunate. So Ashcroft went to Oregon while I was an athlete. And I had 3 more years at Wichita State because I redshirted a year. And I kind of was like, hey, I think college coaching might be what I want to do. I wanted to continue training. I finished college jumping about 13.9, which then was decent, and So Dan Steele was at Oregon then still,
Mhm.
and he, allowed me to be able to come out there and be a volunteer coach. Vin Lanana was a head coach, and continued to train. They had a really high level pole vaulter, Melissa Gergel, who ended up being a national champion on their team. And they, wanted someone else to train with her as well. And Jordan Roscoe was on the team as well. She, had to kind of battle some injuries, so wasn't quite able to do everything that Melissa could. So that kind of got my foot in the door of, hey, well, if you want to be a college coach, you can come out here and train, put Oregon on your resume. And that would be a great kind of step and kind of figure out if this is really what you want to do or not.
Was your connection there? Was Jenny, because she went there?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Jenny was my connection. Yeah. So she coached me that year. And then actually before I even got there, Dan Steele left for the head coaching job at Northern Iowa.
Right.
And then Harry Mayer got hired on that fall to coach Ashton and Bree in the multis and high jump. So that was huge. So I got to spend a whole year following Harry Mayer around with video camera. And
wow.
Yeah. So, and Ashton and Bree are on the team. And so it was great.
That's a great place to put a plug here. I just read Harry's book, View from the Passenger Seat, I think is what he calls it. If you haven't read that, if you're a multi-coach, it's a requirement. You have to have it in your library. But honestly, to the point here with talking about Brooke talking about pole vaulting, things like that. If you're a coach, you have to read this book. Harry did a phenomenal job. If you don't know who Harry Mayer is, I think this is where my old man, learn your history. But he's also been on the podcast. In fact, we did a 3-parter with him because he's just so knowledgeable. I mean, that doesn't surprise you, Brooke, right? I mean, Harry intimately now. That I know that you follow him around with a video camera, which that is, gosh, you can't pay for that education, honestly. But go check out his book. You can get it on Amazon. It's phenomenal. Well worth the read. He's phenomenal human being. So you go to Oregon. First of all, holy cow, what a special time. Harry and I have talked about this time of with the multis and with Bree and Ashton, but just everything else going on as well. It wasn't, Bree and Ashton got a lot of the pub for obvious reasons, but there were other great athletes, other great coaches there as well. And you find yourself vaulting and following Harry and, your old Jenny, your old college coaches there. That had to be kind of a cool time of your life.
Yeah, no, it was an awesome experience. I learned a lot, and Vin let me sit in on their weekly staff meeting. So just being able to do that was great, and obviously just being in that high caliber atmosphere, and the resources that they had and just how they operated, and just, Vin's such a detailed person with a big picture mindset, and just seeing just how he processed things and thought through things. And but it was, they have a lot of stakeholders at Oregon, so there's a lot of people to keep happy in that program. And so it was interesting just to kind of see those things as well. And but Harry was awesome. It was just, and he's a huge mentor of mine still, and always, if I have video of a kid on, have an issue in the shot put or something, I'll shoot off to him and he'll give me perspective, or, so it's been fun to keep in touch with him.
My favorite thing about Harry, his coaching is second to none. Especially in the combined, which means like all of them, right? He's just unbelievable. He is one of the most humblest coaches I have ever met. When I first met him, my former boss, now retired, Fred Dixon, who was on the 76 and on the 80 team that didn't go, was coached by Harry. And so he introduced me to Harry when he got to Oregon and everything. And, the first time I met him, the very first time, and Harry's like, oh, so, how long you been at Gill? What'd you do before? And I was like, oh, I was college coach. I coached at Mississippi State. Oh, what'd you coach? I was like, yeah, sprints and hurdles. Hurdles are my favorite. Hey, so when you're coaching hurdlers, do you do da-da-da-da? And what would you do if this? And I'm like, hey, you tell me, like, you're the expert here. And Harry's like, oh, no. I want to know what you did. And I saw him do that repeatedly with other vault coaches, other shot coaches, other sprint coaches. There was always something for him to learn from someone else. It was amazing. There was never, I think it's impossible to have zero ego, but man, did he come close when it comes to coaching. I can only imagine, even you as this fresh from college, 13-9 vaulter, he probably was like, hey, so How are you, coach? What did you do? Did he ask you? I mean, it's kind of his
So,
MO.
no, he was crazy that way, and
Yeah.
always learning. And, and I remember, we were having a conversation once and he talked about, he's like, so sometimes I'm in practice and I don't have the solution the athlete wants, but I'll tell him, I'm going to figure it out in the next couple of days. I'm going to get back to you. So here's this guy, one of the best coaches in the world. And to have that humbleness, like you said, to tell the athlete, hey, I don't know, but I'm gonna figure it out. I think that was a huge lesson for me,
And relentless in finding out that answer. There's many of his athletes who have gotten 3 a.m. emails because he had finally figured it out. It had come to him, all the experience of all the people he's talked to hit him at 2:30 in the morning. He woke up and would start writing and start emailing. Relentless, that man still is to this day. That's what I love about him, man. Gosh, love him to death. So what, now you mentioned Vin. Love Vin, by the way. I'm good friends with Vin. I've worked a lot with Vin at Oregon and now at Virginia. And other places. But he is, I think you said it really well, attention to detail, like no one's business, but always with the big picture in mind. That's really hard. Some of us think we can do both, but some of us are really attention to detail people, and some of us are big picture people. To do both at a high level, that's a rare person. And Vin is one of those people. I can only imagine, not having worked for Vin, as you're sitting in those meetings, like it might have been like a fork in the road of like, oh yeah, I don't want to be, this is college coaching. Yeah, I can't handle this. This is not my forte. Or, and maybe this is exactly the opposite of what happened to you, is like, like this, like track is not just running in a circle. Like there's a lot that goes into it. And obviously at Oregon, a lot goes into it with all the events and things that they do. And of course the athletes, et cetera. How was that experience for you as far as like, I mean, did it embolden you to be a track coach, a college track coach? Or did you start thinking like, yeah, softball is cool. Maybe I can go coach softball.
Yeah. No, I definitely left, excited about it, but there's also things, like I said, there's things at that level that are challenging, right? And there's times that maybe you don't feel like that the athlete's best interest can always be taken care of because you have all these other things to shuffle and manage as well. But it gave me perspective on that, and watched how different coaches manage those things. Lance Steele was on the staff out there too. So that was, to get to know Lance was great. And so I've been like super blessed, the people that I've gotten to know on the journey that I've been on.
Another Gill podcast alum, by the way, Lance Steele's been on the show too. Yeah, he was fun. Shocker. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So how did you deal with, you're a Kansas kid. I'm assuming you're a small town Kansas kid because that's all there is in Kansas. And you go to Eugene, Oregon, you're a volunteer coach, you're jumping, and that's fun and all, but they're still like, man, I just did 5 years of college. I've got a degree. Like, I'd like to have a job. I'd like to get paid to do this. How are you adjusting to being away from home, volunteer coaching? I know how that is. That's a tough gig.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like I was the kid that I went to college 30 minutes from my hometown, and I was homesick 30 minutes from my hometown. Like I struggled transitioning to college, and I was really shy, very quiet. So to be done with college and move across the country was a pretty big step, and like my growth and who I had become through college. So it was fine. I was so wrapped up in what I was doing, and I was tutoring math to try to make ends meet. I was working as a banquet server at the Hilton out there, and so just trying to do whatever I could. And look, I mean, I was fortunate that I graduated college without any student loans. I had help from family. I, earned some scholarship money as I was there. And if I hadn't done that, then I would have went right into teaching. I think that's something that we don't talk about enough, is that, the more privileged you are financially, the easier it is to get into coaching, and you're not going to make money in the beginning. And so I had enough savings in my account to go out there and be fine, kind of blowing through it and make some money. I lived in an office of this house that, 5 other people, didn't have a closet, and, just kind of made it work. And I didn't care about money, at the time at all. It was just like, I'm just going to survive this. And if I drain my account, I drain my account, and then I'll know if this is what I want to do with my life. But I always knew if things get bad, I have a place to go. I'm always going to have food on my table. Right. Like I was in that situation. So,
that's interesting, Brooke. One of the things that I enjoy as the host here is in these 200 plus conversations that I've had over the past, 3 to 4 years now. Lots of great topics get brought up. Like, I have strong opinion about things with track and field, and I interview people with strong opinions about track and field. But there's still topics that come up that I'm like, oh, I never thought of that. And you just said something that I have never thought about. I'm gonna repeat it. You correct me where I misspoke, and I don't want to speak for you here. You said, we don't talk about this a lot, about the privilege of coaching track and field, that the less debt that we have. See, I'm really screwing up everything you said. Basically, you're saying it's a lot easier to coach if you come out of college with no debt, or you have family backing you, things like that, because a lot of opportunity to get into track is through volunteering, meaning you don't get paid. That's an interesting topic about people getting into coaching track and field.
Yeah. Well, that's reality,
Yeah. And I wonder if I've never thought about that, because I also came out of college with no student loan debt. I actually student coach, so I had all my stuff paid for because I was coaching. You think you weren't a good enough athlete to be a multi. I wasn't a good enough athlete. Okay. So I just, they say, if you can't do, you teach. Well, I was a pretty good teacher because I really couldn't do. So, but yeah,
well, even like I spent the year volunteering in Oregon, and then I went back home for the summer trying to figure out, okay, what's my next step? Applying for jobs. And I got offered a teaching job at my high school, and that paid, and I wasn't interested in it, but they talked me into interviewing, and I was like, oh, it'll be a good experience. And, to be a teacher in small town Kansas, I was going to make $42,000 15 years ago, My
rich.
first coaching job.
You'd be rich.
It was $24,000 a year. And I felt blessed that was my situation.
Yep.
And because tuition was free as a full-time employee. So it was like a great GA position, And so, so even that, right? Like, it's almost double the pay to teach as in to go into coaching.
Right.
And we always talk about teachers don't make any money,
Right.
So.
Yeah. That's super. I'm going to chew on that one for a while. That really hit me, Brooke. Honestly, I never thought about that aspect of it, because I'm very much against volunteer coaches. I just am. And as a track coach advocate, as someone who advocates for track coaches, and I want all of us to get paid more. I want the guys and gals that get paid a ton. I won't name names, but they make a lot of money. I want them to make even more, honestly, because I want the first year track coach to make a healthy live. I want them to be able to live and not live in an office with 5 other people. I'm just abhorrently against volunteer coaching. I understand why it is and why people do it, and in today's world. I just want to abolish that by giving more paid positions and higher paid positions out there. So I've never thought about, well, why are there so many volunteer positions out there, and why are some people able to do that and other people aren't? And you put a whole new spin on that one, Brooke. That hit me. That was really good. Okay, so how long were you at Oregon, and where'd you go next? You obviously interviewed back home. What town did you go to, if you don't mind me asking, in Kansas?
El Dorado is where I grew up.
Oh, El Dorado. Yeah. Butler Community College.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I knew El Dorado. Yeah. Very cool. All right. Love that you were homesick going to Wichita. That cracks me up. I can't imagine you in Oregon now that you said that, but did you come back home then? Because you said you interviewed for teaching.
So I moved back home after the season ended, and just didn't really know what my next step was. I put on a street pole vault competition in my hometown. And that was my 3rd year. We were going to host it. And so I went back to get ready for that, which is a ton of work. And didn't, I had a couple thoughts of coaching opportunities, but none of them kind of panned out. And I was actually, Rainbow had agreed to MC our street vault. And so he came over to it. I did it for 3 years. 2 out of 3 years, the elite section got stormed out. And so I was sitting in his car when it's downpouring, this pit set up, the runway set up. Yeah. I mean, the whole deal, all this work, I'm like, oh my gosh, can't believe it's happening again, and he told me, hey, like there's a job at Kent State. Bill Lawson, one of my buddies, is head coach there, and you're one of the top candidates for the job. I told him about you, and he's interested.
You're like, I don't even know where Kent is. What do you mean I'm one of the top candidates?
Right. And I was a little bit familiar with Kent State because that's where Rainbow came from, like he, and the staff was there. So, but I on that Friday or Thursday before that, I had agreed to interview with my high school for the math position.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was like a Saturday night. And so that next day, Bill Lawson calls me for the first time to talk about the job. And I told him, hey, I'm interviewing for this job tomorrow. Like, I don't really want to teach. I want to coach, but I'm going to go do this. And I interviewed on Monday and they offered me the job, but I had like 3 hours to take it, and I felt good about the Kent State situation, but I didn't know if I was going to get the job or not.
Right.
Like I had one conversation with him. And so I decided, I can always be a teacher. So I turned the job down and was just hoping that the Kent State, deal was going to work out. And luckily it did. And
man, this story could have been a lot different.
Right. Yeah.
I'd be calling Laws right now. Like, dude, you ruined this poor kid's life. So you go to Kent State University with Bill Lawson, another just deeply good friend. I love Laws. In fact, I think I've told the story before, but I interviewed for the sprint hurdles job at Oregon with Martin Smith. They hired some guy named Steve Sylvie who won 10 national championships. So I don't know why I didn't get the job, but after the interview, that's when I was in Kansas. Bill Lawson calls me and says, hey, I just want to get to know you a little bit better. You're 25 years old and just had an interview for, the most coveted assistance job in this country. And just had a great conversation with him and asked him for advice. I had signed what I thought was the #1 recruiting class in the nation, no matter what division. I had some big boys and girls coming into Chanute, Kansas. But Sue Parks, then at Ball State, had said, hey, if you don't get the Oregon job, I'll hire you here. My assistant went and took over Western Michigan. And so I was like, okay, back to Division I or coach some amazing kids in the middle of nowhere, Chanute, Kansas. And Lawson just gave me just really good advice and changed the trajectory of my life. I went on to Ball State and then I hit the ultimate goal. I went, got to Mississippi State after a couple of years at Ball State. So I have just honestly a huge place in my heart for Bill Lawson. I can only imagine that first conversation you had with him because he is who he is on the first call and the 100th call. You had to be like, oh man, is this really what I want to get into?
Right, exactly. Yeah, not everyone can handle this, but no, he was awesome. I was really fortunate. Obviously he ended up offering me the job and I moved out to Ohio. And I actually, the position was the director of operations and then to assist him with the pole vault and the multis. So it wasn't even really it was a coaching job, but not really. But it was like, my mentors was like, I would, do it, get your foot in the door. And after being there for about, I don't know, we had practice for maybe a week or two once practice started. And Lawson said, I think you're ready to take over the pole vaulters. And I was like, yes, so now I was in control of the pole vaulters and I coached the decathletes in the pole vault. And then still kind of assisted him some of the multis with the other events, but I did all the director of operations responsibilities. He did a little bit, like he scheduled hotel rooms. So I'd have to do that. That stuff was done, but it was a lot. It was crazy hours doing everything that way and, coaching, and trying to do my best for these kids. And you're new, so you don't know anything. You don't know who to ask questions to,
Right.
But it was great. Being in the director of operations role I learned so much about just how things work and how hard that job is and how impactful that job can be. If you have a really good director of operations, it's a kind of a glue for the program and they can have a huge influence, and so that was, a great experience. Luckily, I was there for 3 years. As time went on, each year, he kind of took a little bit of the administrative stuff off my plate and gave me a little bit more coaching responsibilities. So,
yeah. And, we talked about privilege earlier, programs that can have a DO, they're a little bit better off than those who don't. And you had to be around this time, when you talk about track director of ops, I think of Andrea and I think of Jess Ryden, and a couple others who kind of like in my mind, from the outside looking in, revolutionized like, oh, this isn't just some straight out of college kid that you push paperwork on. It's like, oh, no, this is a person who helps run that program so that you can focus on coaching and recruiting. But at that time, because we're now probably around 05, 06 when you get to Kent.
No, I graduated high school in 04. So
04. No, so we're 10, 11, 12. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's still
He was at Akron at that time. So
who
Andrea was at Akron at the time.
yes. Okay, good. That's what I was. So you had to be one of the kind of first DOs out there. There were a few. Now somebody's going to yell at me because I'm going to say now everybody has one. I know not everybody has one. The majority of people don't have one. I understand that. But they're certainly much more common today in 2023 than they were in 2011, 2012. I don't know that I realized you were, kind of started out as a DO on that side of things while coaching as well. That's interesting.
That's the female token role, right? To get started.
No, I don't know. It might be. You tell me. I'm not going to use. You try to trap me with my male privilege right there, don't you?
No, I think that's a challenge, right? That's a challenge for women in coaching. Sometimes it's like to get, they want a female on their staff. They want that representation, but it's like, are you going to have the responsibilities to really let people know you can coach?
Right. Well, okay, you brought it up, so let's go in there now a little bit here. Why, when I look at, no, we're going to wait. Because it's part of your story as well. So let's wait. We are going to talk about that though. So let's make sure, don't let me forget, Brooke. I'll end up forgetting to talk about that because that's important. What you said there and to unpack that. And, maybe there's a way to make change. Maybe we change someone's mind who thinks that way and says, oh man, they're actually right. Like, why aren't I hiring a female to just coach? Like, why not? So we'll make sure we talk about that. So how long you were at Kent State. So I coached 2 years at Ball State. So I was in that conference, and that is a really, to me, and it's because I was there, but it's a special conference. I mean, there are some just grinders, hardworking coaches, hardworking athletes for this quote unquote mid-major conference, man. There's plenty of All-Americans that come out. You got to coach if you're going to be in that conference. That's not a conference you just skate around. How did you enjoy coaching against some just amazing people in that conference?
Yeah, no, it was great. Dennis Mitchell was at Akron, so I had the vault, so I'm competing against him. And, so it was a really good experience. There's so many great coaches that come out of the MAC, it's just, it seems like a typical route for most. So, so I was fortunate. Nathan Finger was on staff. He was the throws coach then, now the head coach, their associate head coach that's at Kent State now, Michael Schober, was one of the decathletes on the team that I got to coach. So, those roots go deep, at a school like that. So, I loved it there. It was an awesome, at that level, you have so many young assistant coaches, so, and you don't have all these facilities just spread out all over like a Power 5 school. So all the different coaches, our offices were up and down the same hallway, so you got to know the field hockey coaches and the golf coach. And, so it was kind of unique that way compared to some of the other experiences.
I was about to ask you, and I still am, like, what did you learn working with Bill Lawson? Because he's a little bit of, I don't know that he gets the due that he deserves, meaning not only the athletes that he's put out, but just the influence that he has had positively in our sport and with other coaches. But then I started thinking like, oh man, well, you also worked under, Jenny and Harry, like up to this is a very, we're still very young in your journey here, but you have really, Rainbolt included here, you've had some really impactful people in your life up to this point right here. I mean, like, not just like, oh, big people, but I'm talking about like some people would have a lot of these guys and gals on their Mount Rushmore. I mean, these are hugely impactful people. Are you at this age and stage where you are there at Kent, even after 2-3 years there, do you have any sense of like, oh, like this is pretty special. Like I've had some pretty special people in my life. Or do you still think like, okay, I'm just journeying along. They'll be the next head coach I work for, or maybe I'll be the head coach one day. Do you get a sense of like who you're actually working with during this, again, short time of your career?
Yeah. No, I don't know. I don't think I really grasped that fully, at that time. I don't have enough perspective, but I definitely knew some of them were really special people, but when that's just kind of, they're all along your journey, it just becomes the norm,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. The norm of having people like Harry Mara and Bill Lawson and Steve Ramble. Yeah, sure. Just everybody has those same mentors touching your life. Yeah, I get it. Makes sense. So how long, you said 3 years at Kent State, and where to next and why?
Yeah. So, Dale Cowper called from University of Louisville. He actually tried to hire Jenny Ashcroft there, and she wasn't interested in the job with where she was at the time. And luckily she recommended me. And so he called, and they weren't in the ACC yet. But they knew they were going to make that move. They went Big East, and they're going to be the American for a year and then the ACC or the ACC. So it was, it was a no-brainer career-wise, to make that move, financially going into a Power 5 conference, and it was closer to home, after Kent was, 15, 16 hours to Kansas. Louisville's about 10. So made it, you can drive home in a day,
that is a track coach right there. It's like, I saved 5 hours. I'm good.
That's our world. Right. So, yeah, and it was great. It was, I was there for 9 years. So
yeah, I don't know that I knew you were there that long I don't know why. Like I was expecting it to be somewhere between Kent and Louisville. So when you said Louisville, I was like, man, is that right? You get old, Brooke, you just start forgetting things. Now Louisville's pretty cool in regards to, you named one thing that I was going to bring up is, going from the Big East into the ACC, one of the premier track conferences. I mean, that conference, boy, that is no joke. That's as much as I have so much respect for the MAC, man, the ACC, name me a weak event. There ain't one. Jumps, distance, throws, it don't matter. Those schools and those coaches are just getting after it year after year. It's quite amazing. It's gotten better every year to where now it's just like, it's just not fun. I wouldn't want to coach there. It's just no fun. But a cool, interesting campus, I kind of call it it's almost like a city campus. You have a lot of concrete, but there's a lot of cool things going on there with Louisville. It's kind of unique in that sense. It's not a straight campus or concrete campus, but it is unique. The highway's right there, but the facility is phenomenal. I love the facility. I love the athletic facilities, where the offices are and things like that. Tell me about your time at Louisville. Did it meet what you thought it would be? So I went to the Power 5, I went to the SEC, and I hadn't, I thought everything was going to be easy. I thought, well, everybody I call is going to know Mississippi State and they're all going to want to come to me. And then I forgot that if I'm calling them, they also want to go to Florida, Texas, USC, et cetera. And it's like, oh crap, this got harder. What was your expectation going into, a Power 5 position here at Louisville?
Yeah, no, I just told the story to a recruit and her mom the other night when I was talking to him that, when I was at Kent State, now if I was recruiting someone and if I heard, Louisville was in on them, or Ohio State, and I'd just be like, I'm not going to get that kid, But then when I got to Louisville and I heard, Kent State's in on a kid, then I'm like, we can't match their offer. Like, we can't get that kid. You know what I mean? Like, so those things are real with college coaches, right? And, I'm trying to encourage athletes.
We're going to have a lot of fun when we start talking about recruiting here in a second, bro, because that brings up a great story. I love it. Keep going. Sorry, keep going. Oh. That's so funny.
But no, it was an awesome experience. Talking about mentors, then Joe Walker Jr. is on staff.
Oh, yes.
He had retired from Ole Miss. His son is our distance coach. He's our jumps coach. Talk about humble. I mean, I'm there for 2 months and he's asking me questions about training or his athletes or whatever. And I'm like, why are you asking me? He's one of my best, he's a great friend still. Awesome. So it was awesome. The ACC was tough. I mean, our first year in it, I had a sophomore pole vaulter and she tied for third, and she was really talented. We were complete different people. She was a Southern Belle. And so it took a lot for me to figure out how to get her going. And she got third at indoors and was, standing on the podium, 3 people go on the podium in the ACC. And I remember standing there thinking like, man, that was hard. I don't know if I'm going to have another athlete on the podium again. Like, that's how challenging it was. Right. Mm-hmm. And continue on. And obviously we had a lot of kids on the podium, but that's how tough it was. Bob Phillips is in the conference involved and so many great combined event coaches. And, so yeah, no, it was fun. And I mean, I learned a lot and, we had a great staff dynamic, especially when I first got there. And, so yeah, so it was a good experience living in Louisville, living in a city for the first time too. It's fun.
It's a cool town. Yeah, for sure. What were you used the word learn. What had you been doing for coaching education? And what I mean by that, there's formal and informal. Formal being the USATF coaching education track, now USTF CCCA, Altus, et cetera. And then informal, and I have to assume you've had a lot of informal because you had a Harry Mara, Bill Lawson, you mentioned Joe. Even as a Mississippi State coach and unofficial alum, I still have to love Joe, even though he was, a long time Ole Miss, kicked my butt for the 2 years that I was there, that's for sure. But So I have to assume you're doing a lot of informal, talking to other coaches, talking to Jenny when you were out there in Oregon, et cetera. Hey, so what do you do here? How you doing this? You mentioned having to figure out that athlete. You called her the Southern Belle. How do I actually get her going in the right direction? Were you doing any, in what kinds of maybe formal education? Were you doing any USATF, USTFCA? What were you doing that route to get better coaching?
Yeah. No, I did the USTF CCCA combined events class that was with Revelto and Grimes. So that was really
wow.
good.
Yeah.
Ashcroft was like an ongoing mentor, Harry was ongoing mentor. I would go and spend time at Wichita State when I was home, on breaks, and talk to their staff and get, perspective from them on different events. And so I had a lot to learn. Like I was a pole vaulter, and I didn't want to get pigeonholed as a pole vault coach. I was super aware of that happening to coaches. And so I was trying to make sure that didn't happen to me, and so the combined events, luckily getting to follow Harry around Oregon, and then, helping Coach Lawson with the multis at Kent State. And eventually I had a lot more, involvement with those athletes. That when I got to Louisville, I got the decathlon and the pole vault originally, and then they gave me the women the next year in the HEP. So
why did you gravitate towards the multis versus the other jumps versus the long, triple, and high?
Yeah, well, I think for one, it was just the situation I was in. It was coaches I was around, and what I had access to and what they needed at Louisville when I got there, and what they needed at Kent State when I got there. But I love the combined events. I think there's a similarity between, like, mentality wise, between pole vaulters and combined event athletes. So being able to coach both of those events at Louisville, and only having those two events, was huge. Like it allowed me to really hone in on what I was doing, compared to having, the jumps on top of that, which some coaches have to manage. So.
Yeah, good point. I know, talking with some just really top-notch combined events coaches. You mentioned Cliff Revelto, another podcast alum. Anytime I say podcast alum, that means you got to go back and listen to that episode as well, right? Okay. So Harry Mara, Cliff Revelto. You mentioned Chris Grimes, another kind of a little unsung hero. I'm not sure he gets the due that he deserves for what he coaches as well. Bill Lawson. But when I talk to some of these high-level combined events coaches, they're really, and this sounds like a slam, but it's actually maybe one of the secret, like, high praises in track coaching world. They're really good generalists. And that sounds bad, right? It's like, oh, because, the word general, specialist, we're supposed to be specialist in things and, go a mile deep into the 100-meter dash or whatnot. But these guys like Cliff and Bill, they do the basics really, really well. Do you think, having gone into, because of situational situations there, going to combined events instead of going into strictly other jumps, do you think that made you a better pole vault coach?
Oh, absolutely. Gives you some humility in what, like, I'm trying to teach kids how to throw a shot put, right? So it's just like, when I'm showing drills or whatever, those movements are new to me, right? So you have a little bit more perspective on maybe things that was easy for me as a pole vaulter. These athletes, it's not easy for them. And I just felt that, 2 hours ago in the shot put, right? And I'm a lefty, so showing drills with the right foot, and it get, be good that way. But no, I think you really understand the basics of movement, and you have to, like, understand commonalities and what is actually really important in training and what isn't. And so I think the combined events kind of teaches you that, for sure. So
I hear a lot of people complain about USATF level 1, because, it's 20 hours and like 2.25 days, and you go over every event, sprints, jumps, throws, distance. And a lot of people are taking level 1 to get to level 2, so where you just do sprints and hurdles or just jumps, etc. And so I hear, and I used to, I taught over 30 something level 1s, and I'd always hear the feedback of like, oh man, I was falling asleep during distance. It was a sprint coach saying that, of course, or the throws coach might, oh, we barely done any throws, or we did a bunch of distance and jumps and all this kind of stuff. But I wonder now if level 1 isn't like the most important thing you can do, because you learn about the basics of each one.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, it's like, as a combined event coach, when I would go to the coaches convention, right? Like the specialty coaches are kind of like, I don't need to go to that one or that one. And I'm like, I'm going to every, I've got so many different runs I want to hit. Right. Which obviously, when you're a young coach and you're learning new events, But I mean, I think ultimately it's, you know, like you have to understand the events, but I think if you understand the athlete, that's, you know, the most important aspect. And I think, you know, those great coaches we talked about, like they understood that, you know, that mentored me. They understood that you're coaching athletes, you're not coaching a specific event. So that was something that I really focused on. And I mean, I have a story. So Joe Delgado was a athlete at Oregon, not when I was there, but he was there for 4 years. He was a decathlete. He scored 75, 55, I think, at Oregon. And he came to Louisville as a grad transfer. So it was the first like decathlete that I got scholarship, significant money for. And so he came in, and it was kind of a little bit of a reach to get my head coach to do that. You know, luckily it was like end of the year. He was good. He was a national level kid, but luckily we had the money. Cowper went for it, and he came in, and I was actually on maternity leave his first 6 weeks of practice. So he comes and transfers. I go on maternity leave. Our sprints coach took care of him fine, you know. And then I get back, and we're about to have a shot put session, and we're up by the ring, and he starts, you know, doing some footwork drills, and my stomach just drops because I'm like, this kid rotates in the shot put. I've never coached a rotational shot putter before. Not only have I never coached a rotational shot putter before, I've barely watched somebody coach the rotational shot put, you know. The glide and the shuffle are the two that I've been familiar with between Harry and Law, and you know, so I was pretty quiet that first session. You know, I'm like, Joe, you rotate? Yeah. I'm like, huh, all right, you know, and you know, I kind of let him go through his normal routine. He's older, he's his 5th year guy, you know, and you know, I get video, I send it off to Harry, like, hey, let me know what your thoughts are on this. You know, I start researching, you know, and and he ended up PRing by I think a meter that year in the shot put. And it had nothing to do with me having a great understanding of rotational shot put, right? But I knew Delgado, right? And I knew him and what he would respond to. And I didn't overcoach him, you know. I let him do his thing and made sure he's balanced, and you know, and so that for me gave me more, I guess, confidence of like understanding, like, hey, if you just understand basics, you know, like athletes are able to figure a lot of things out as well. So
one of my favorite, after 200 something guests that we've had, it was early, I think in the first 50s, we had Brooks Johnson on the show, and Brooks really broke it down as far as every event is the exact same. You're moving the center of mass. You just do it in some different form, whether you rotate in the shot or whether you run 5,000 meters. It's so if you understand that first and foremost, you shouldn't be a sprints coach or a pole vault coach or a shot put coach. You should be a track coach. I mean, he was really adamant about it, and it was really kind of you know, again, it's easier for me on this side because I don't have to then go to the track and try to implement this. But it was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. No wonder I was a crummy coach, Brooks. Thanks. But it made a lot of sense of being you're a coach, not a jumps coach, a sprints coach, etc. I can't imagine. You talked about your stomach just dropping. I can't imagine that first time you walk back out. You already know you have your own challenges of, okay, the kids have been here 6 weeks and I haven't. I've been on maternity leave. That's going to be its own challenge here. I've got to earn their trust quickly because everybody else has earned their trust in the last 6 weeks. And then he rotates, and you're just like, oh, wait a minute. Like I have like almost purposely shunned that because that's not even in my world. I do man. I love that you tackled it though. You know, video back to Hera, probably called some other mentors like, okay, so what have you done? How have you moved a power into a spinner? What do you do here? And then the kid PRs by a meter. That ultimately, you know, our sport is defined by the tape measure and the stopwatch. So ultimately it's like, well, did Brooke do a good job or not? It's like, only PR'd by a meter. I don't care if Dale was coaching the shot putter. If they do a meter, that's a phenomenal job. So that's really good.
Yeah, no, he had unreal. We didn't go to a track meet that year that he did PR and something. It was unbelievable for a 5th year guy. It was like he just had he was super dedicated. We had a unique connection, and it was fun. He ended up getting 4th NCAAs at outdoor season, and so it was awesome experience.
Well, you know, during your 9 years there at Louisville, and correct me where I get this wrong. These are outside looking in type diagnosis. And I forgot to tell you this during pre-interview, I don't do any research. So Brooke, I didn't go look and see how many All-Americans in this and all ACC. I have only just what I have just observed in the time that I observe when I'm at meets and things like that. But you, through your time at Louisville for the first 5, 6, 7 years out of those 9, you always had a good group. Like I said, Delgado and other people, you had really good multis. I remember a lot of multis scoring at ACCs. I was at ACCs down at Miami and at Virginia. And I was like, oh, always Louisville. They're going to have at least one. And usually it was a couple of multis and a vaulter. There'd be a vaulter here and there as well. But my memory serves me that here in the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years of Louisville, the vault, what happened? Because something got really good in the vault. National champion, first of all, who does that? We forget that winning's hard. There's only one winner of each event every stinking year. So it means there's only one coach that has coached a winner every year. And you coached the national champion. I think, did you have third place that year as well? Did you have first and third or something like that?
Not at
I might be getting that mixed up. Yeah. But you're the national champion. I got that right. I know that. What changed in those last few years? It could be, more scholarship. I don't know. It could be luck as well. There just seemed to be like a preponderance of more success the last few years.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it just comes back to continuity. You've been somewhere for 9 years. You've been able to build a culture. I was fortunate when I came in that I had a couple of athletes that were really great kids that were really committed. They were maybe more Big East talent than ACC talent, but they really helped kind of get the culture rolling. And then, once that kind of ball starts, and I've just was able to just get fortunate with some recruiting and the kids that came in. And, and when Gabby Leone, who ended up winning a national title, when she came in, I just actually talked to her this morning, and, it's like, she's like, I remember, Morgan Zacharias and Jade Hawkins and Holly Hankinson and Eric Fox, and they were bought into what you were doing. And so I was bought in, and so I think that's the great thing about being somewhere for a long time, and so then you're able to just continue to build on that. And, that, 13-foot vaulter that you had to pay 50% for 9 years ago, like now you don't have to do that. And now it doesn't cost as much because they want to be a part of that. Right. And it's worth it for them.
What does, you talked to Gabby this morning, what does again, winning a national championship, and I'm not talking about a D1 national championship, that's special, but so is winning D2, D3, et cetera. Heck, being a state champion, even crazy states like Kansas, because I can say that because Alabama's the same way, that have 6 classes for a small state. I don't like that at all, but it's cool. It's great. That's a big deal. What is I always wonder, I know they don't, because this is our world we live in. People walk by Gabby every day. People are on the bus with Gabby every day. They have no idea that she was the best in the country in the pole vault one year, that she won a battle and won the national title. What does she do today? She's probably still vaulting. That was just that one too long ago.
Yeah. No, she's sponsored by Puma, and she's vaulting as a professional. And so it's pretty awesome that she's set up to do. She set herself up, man. She had a great end of the year, made the world team.
That's right.
So that was big. And so yeah, no, it was pretty crazy I told the recruiting story about her a couple of weeks ago, but I didn't know who she was until after her senior year of high school. We were at New Balance, and she'd already graduated, and she was competing, and she fortunately hadn't made a commitment yet to school. And she came on a visit a week later and came to school probably 3 or 4 weeks after that, Wow. So to be able to pick a kid out, get her to come, develop her into what she was, man, what an awesome thing to be able to do.
If only it always happened like that.
Right. Yeah.
You mentioned Melissa Gergel earlier, and we've been friends on Facebook for a decade now. But she's doing nursing or a doctor. I can't remember which one. She's in the medical field. Yeah. Yeah. Up in Chicagoland. And so I'll see her take pictures of they'll be out or whatever, the graduating class. And I'm like, I wonder if they have any idea. They don't have any idea. She was national champion. And I'm talking about, when I say battle, I was there. I was at Drake, Tina Sutej. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name correctly. And I can't remember the other. There was 3 just superstar. Tina was one of them for sure. And Melissa pulls it out, man. It was an amazing, at night, it was amazing competition. But I just wonder, they have no idea how special she is and what kind of athlete. It's like you have no idea. You think you're good at your rec league basketball. Let me tell you what this Let me tell you what Business and Gurgle did. It's fascinating. Okay, well, Brooke, we're talking about a lot of success, a lot of fun that you had at Louisville, a lot of growth, 9 years. I mean, that, that consistency and that continuity does mean something. You use the word culture. Building culture is super hard, easy to destroy, super hard to build. It takes 9+ years to build and keep layering on that culture. But everybody listening has already looked at your name at the title of the podcast, and it didn't say the University of Louisville. It says Elevate Athlete Recruiting. Talk to us about this transition that's occurred over this past year.
Yeah. So, no, I mean, I absolutely love being a college coach. It was, something that I felt like was really what I was built to do, while I was doing it, and just being able to influence those athletes and being a part of the team and building something and being in a competitive environment. But, the biggest thing is I've got 3 little boys myself. So my oldest is 5. So talk about Gabby. During Gabby's 5 years at Louisville, I had 3 maternity leaves that she managed, and
wow.
So it was crazy, and COVID was in the middle of that. And we kind of went into COVID with really just starting, we were at the end of the indoor season with 2 kids. We hadn't went through the tough part with 2 kids yet. And then everything got shut down. And then we come back from COVID and now we have 3 kids, so it just got, it's tough. So it kind of got to the point where I just felt like, the challenges that were there and what it was taken away, it just felt like it was the right time to kind of step away and not travel as much and spend more time with my kids. And it was hard. I mean, it was a hard, tough, grueling decision, for sure. But I think it was the right one, for where we're at in life. And when I quit, I had no idea what I was going to do. And when you're a college coach, it's not like you can put feelers out there that you might step away. Right.
Right.
So it's just this weird, this where I think sometimes coaches kind of they might want to get out, but it's like, what do you do? And you're making pretty good money. Right. And I can't really go search for jobs very easily while I'm in this role, but I was fortunate. My husband does well, and we're in Louisville. He owns a business here. And so to leave the area is a challenge, right. Because of his business. So it's kind of like, if I'm going to be a college coach, this is where I'm going to be at. And so decided it was, I could step away, and we were in an okay spot financially, or if I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, I could do that. I found out about 4 weeks in, that was not what I was cut out for. And so that wasn't, which I found that out during COVID, that wasn't what I was cut out for. But then I really found out with 3 of them running around that, it takes a special human being to do that. And I'm not it. So I knew I wanted to do something. And so I applied for some jobs, and really when I had stepped away, I had this thought of recruiting education. And the first week it was announced that I quit, I had about 5 different families reach out wanting unbiased perspective on recruiting. And so that kind of piqued my interest even more. And, but everyone kind of told me, hey, take some time, don't jump right into anything yet. Life was crazy, with that many kids and in this, college coaching scene. And the end of the last year was crazy because we were at USA's and Worlds, and, I was gone 5 weeks of the last 10 weeks of the season. Right. And so I waited, I kind of put it on the back burner. But I had met with a couple of local club coaches when I was first thinking about it, of just kind of getting their perspective. Because I don't know the high school side of it, right? I know from the college side. And after a couple months, one of those club coaches reached out to me and said, hey, I meet with my group once a month, we do different topics. Would you want to come talk about recruiting? And, so I spent 20 hours preparing for this 1 hour free, consultation or education seminar, but in my mind, I'm like, okay, if I do this, then I'll have this, it's worth the time, and so I went and presented, and that coach was really great. He was with Hero Sprint Club, and he was like, hey, this is something you could really do. This is really valuable information. And so I kind of spun, had that spin around my head for a little while, and then, decided, I'm going to get a website going and try to create content and see if I can help people through this process and educate them. And I feel like I was in a really unique position of understanding the current landscape, but able to say things that college coaches can't say, and they have rules against some of the things they can do that I don't have anymore. So yeah, so that's kind of how it all started.
So what's the business? Are you consulting with junior, senior athletes on best practices for recruiting? Are you consulting with other college coaches on how best practices on a recruit? What service are you providing?
Yeah. So right now, I'm still kind of figuring all of that out,
Sure.
I kind of felt like I'll take this year and really learn. And so I'm doing some like one-on-one consulting, so families, we'll do consulting calls to help them navigate wherever they're at in their process or what challenges they have, or then I've created content. So I have a website that athletes and families can go to if they, if they want to understand the recruiting timeline, they can buy that video for $12 or something. I'm trying to make it very accessible. It's kind of my plan, my vision. I've done recruiting, live seminars that people can sign up for and cover topics. And I went out and spoke at Reno at the Pole Vault Summit and spoke to the parents out there. And that went really well. It's when you talk to people and like exactly who your audience is, and it's really easy to, it's easier to really navigate that. And that was good. So that kind of continued to snowball, and did a couple of Pole Vault specific seminars. And yeah, so I'm still kind of navigating kind of what all my services are. I've had clubs reach out to speak directly to their club, to try to hit, all their athletes. And I've thought about going a coaching mentorship route for college coaches, kind of not just recruiting, but there's, like you talked about, like I've been super blessed with all these great mentors that have impacted my career. And I understand that there's people out there that don't have that, especially in the pole vault and combined events, it's hard to find those resources and someone that can really kind of like walk you through it. So I thought about implementing something like that this fall, but I haven't got there yet. But yeah, so I'm more focused on the families and the athletes, and helping kind of guide them through it and giving them just reality.
Yeah, you're forgiven for not having it all figured out already, Brooke, just so you're aware. Super valuable, right? I mean, when you're talking about track and field specifically and college opportunities, there's so many, right? There's, 12 to 1,500 track programs out there on the collegiate side. And typically we know most schools based on their TV time of football. That's where we know, we might not have heard of the Citadel because they don't play on Saturdays on ESPN, but we know of LSU because they do play on ESPN and whatnot on Saturdays. But that doesn't mean LSU is the right program for you as a track and field athlete. Maybe the Citadel is the exact right spot for you. How do you navigate? You've had a lot of good experience. You've had tons of success coaching wise, like just put it to the side, because that's a no brainer of what you've done as an athlete. You're not a 50-year-old coach, meaning you haven't coached for 25 years, but you do have experience. But all of that experience also has been in Division I. Also, your athletic side has been in Division I. How do we've been talking, we've used the word bias quite often here today, and I love that, to have these very frank conversations. How do you, now that you are not working for a Division I institution, and you, I'm going to assume Division I is not right for every athlete, regardless of their athletic ability. That still doesn't mean you should be going to Division I. How do you navigate your own biases in regards to Division I versus NAIA junior college, obviously D2, D3, when you're consulting with parents and children out there?
Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, I feel like I'm trying to use this year to learn as much as I can, so that's communicating with coaches at those different levels of what are the differences, I don't know if David Fletch was an athlete at Oregon, phenomenal athlete. He's a Division III coach in California. And, we had a conversation a few weeks ago of just like, hey, tell me about how this experience is as a Division III coach. He was a very high level Division I prospect, getting his perspective. Right. So I've been trying to get a hold of different coaches and gain their, knowledge and then utilize that with these athletes. Right. Because, trying to really understand what these kids value, what do you really care about, and what is your commitment level, and what you may think you want this, but that's not really reality, and I'm in a great position to be able to tell them some of those things,
Right.
where their high school coach doesn't want to tell them, no, you're not a Division I athlete, right? Where I can say, hey, like, I know this is what you want, but you're not close.
Right.
Like, you better have a butt kicking year to get even a phone call back, a returned email. That's, something you want to read. So, but yeah, I like, the hard part for me is that there's so many programs. Like, I can't have a pulse on every situation. Right. And even the programs that I'm pretty familiar with, you never know really what's going on.
That's right.
And so my goal isn't to place athletes, at all. Like, I don't want to be a placement service. I want to empower them, give them the knowledge, help them understand what questions they need to get answered, help them understand how to set their expectations. I asked the question on Twitter a while back, like, why do athletes not get better in college? And it was great. I mean, it, blew up on Twitter, right? Everybody has perspective on it. And I think a lot of it is like, expectations don't meet reality, and that's, so being able to help them understand that what you think this is may not be what it is. And that's fine. There's awesome situations for someone at every school, for what they need, but just making sure that that's really what you care about and it fits what you want. And understanding that there's no, sunshine and rainbows situation for everybody, even, Mondo Duplantis, at LSU, there's probably things at LSU he wished was different, and he's one of the best athletes in the world, and so that's just the reality. So helping them just like understand those challenges are going to come, and, and putting in the best situation so there are less challenges, or they have people there that really care to help them get through that.
In general, so you are starting to and keeping your finger on the pulse of coaches as it relates now to recruiting, right? You used to pay attention to coaches like, well, how they coach, make sure maybe I should be stealing something from them, right? Now you're like, okay, well, how are they as a coach in their program? And maybe you think about things like, well, are they going to be there next year if a parent asks me about that program, et cetera? And you're thinking about the motivations of parents and motivations of kids. I love how you said that. What are their expectations of that? We like to blanket statement say, too many kids have a D1 or bust mentality. I also like to kind of put that blanket on coaches too, by the way, that, I think if any coach would say, hey, I got a D1 opportunity for you. No, I'm good. Some will stay, but a lot of people, no matter what that D1 would go, right? Without care of pay, location, spouse, they're gone, right? You had a D1 or bust type mentality as well, right? I'm wondering, is that true with the kids that you have talked to in general? Is that true? And is there anything actually wrong with that? That doesn't mean they're going to go into $100,000 of debt to go walk on at LSU because they're a 15 flat 100-meter man, right? But is it not okay to have that? If Division I, these are all air quotes here, is the best division, meaning from first place to eighth place at the national meet. By the way, I just came back from Division II and I just watched Division III. You better be on your high horse to make All-American there too, boys and girls. What was D3? 10, 16, 10, 14, 10 flat or just under with wind or something like that. In the Division II, I always go to the 100-meter dash. That's salty. You got to be an unbelievable athlete. But is it not, if it's true, and I want to hear that answer, that there's this majority of D1 or bust, is it also wrong for a kid to have a D1 or bust mentality, knowing that they may not go to Division I? They may go to a great school like CMS or West Texas A&M or the Citadel.
Yeah. I definitely think that's still out there for sure, of kids like having that mentality. And some of it is just, like we talked about earlier, just like awareness, right? Of representation. They don't even know what else is out there and what exists and where they could fit in at. That's all they see, So I was just talking to an athlete the other day and I said, do you want to be a Division I athlete? And he's kind of an up and coming junior. And he's like, I think so. I don't want to go to every meet and win every meet. I want to have a team that's competitive. And and he might get to that point where, yeah, that might be the reality at most meets he'd go to if he went to a different division, but that might not, be a situation, So, I think a lot of it just depends on what kids care about, and what I get a lot is like, they want a high level, like a high academic school. They want that college football atmosphere, and they don't know where else to look at that's going to have that except being at a Division I level, even if they're competitively not quite there yet, like what I really need to figure out, and hopefully somebody's listening that would let me know. I need to know what the best Division II academic schools are, because they have this mentality of like, there's really good Division I academic schools, and there's very good, there's some really good Division III academic schools. But the Division II level or NAI level, like, what are the best academic? And I'm sure I could Google it. I've just like had this thought the last couple of days, and I haven't.
Yeah.
Yet, but so it's just figuring out like, okay, if this is what you really care about, like, what are some other options that would be a fit?
Right.
So
what would because I'm gonna ask our listeners, because that's a great question. Tell me your Twitter handle here real quick.
It's at Coach Demo. DEMO, because that's my maiden name.
Well, yeah, you can update things on Twitter, right?
Well, you can't. Can you change your handle?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh my gosh! Yep, learn something new every day. Okay.
Oh,
I'm new
my
to this social
goodness.
media thing. I can change. Okay.
Because I can't remember what mine was, like Mike Cunningham, probably 1976, my birth year, because Mike Cunningham was taken. But then this was probably about maybe 10 years ago. I was spending a lot of money on Twitter ads for the company back when I ran that side of it. So I had my own personal Twitter. Is way before Elon Musk, by the way. I don't think this would fly today. But I had an account manager at Twitter. And so one day I was just like, hey, I looked at Mike Cunningham, and that guy hasn't used that Twitter in like 7 years. Can I just get it? Oh, let me check. Within 7 days, that dude got kicked off. Yep, he got kicked off, and it was my account.
Wow. Yeah.
But yeah, all your followers stay. Yeah, all you can change all that. I can't. As soon as you said demo, I was like, wait a minute, because we did not mention that. I was like, that's old school now. Come on, man.
Well, I tried when I first started this, and I couldn't figure it out. So I just assumed I couldn't change the actual.
My.
There we go.
I hope you're not giving much consultation today on social media recruiting. We need to up the social media game here a little bit, Brooke.
Right. Yeah, no, it's not my fault.
If you're listening to this and she's still at Coach Demo, and she needs to change that, I want to know. That's a great question. If I were going to look for the top 10 Division II NAIA academic schools that are also in, say, the top 20, 25 nationally track programs, what would they be? That's a really good question, because you're right. Division II feels like it gets kind of lost in there, because you have Division I, so you know about the Harvards and Yales and USCs, et cetera. And then Division III gets this like, every school in Division III must be like an academic Ivy League, essentially. That's not true, by the way, but there are a lot of great academic institutions in Division III, and it's Division II, and it's like, I don't know which one has the best research facilities and all that other kind of stuff. See, I'm a dummy. I can tell you which ones have the best track facilities. That's about as far as I go in Division II. Outside of the coaches are amazing. So tweet me, mine at Mike Cunningham. And for now, until she changes that, she's going to go change it right now. I just know it, at Coach Demo. Let us know. That's a great question. I love that question. So what the next question, so I asked about the kids. You're meeting with a lot of parents and talking to a lot of parent groups and things. And when you're talking to a group of athletes, you're talking with their parents as well. They're kind of on the side asking you questions. What's a bigger problem? A kid thinking he needs to be Division I or bust, which that's just a crazy thing, because Division I is really, in my opinion, 2 divisions. It's a Power 5 and everybody else. Sorry, no one's a bigger fan of their alma mater, me, Troy University. My son's name is Troy. That's how much of a fan. You didn't name any of your 5 boys Wichita or Shocker. I'm just guessing.
We have a Knox, though. My husband went to Tennessee, so we have a little bit of that. But
one of my really good friends, he's the head coach at UAB. He was our GA at Mississippi State. He went to Tennessee as well, and his son is Knox. That's awesome. That's a great name, though. As long as you kept Ville out of that. No, don't name them Knoxville. Knox is a great name. But yeah, to think that like my alma mater, Troy, is competing against LSU and Florida State and Louisville is ludicrous. And I love my alma mater is doing an amazing job. I love Mark and Michelle, the head coaches there. They're some of the best people in this world, but it's not reality. They ain't competing against the same. So what's the bigger issue here, that the kid wants to be D1 bust, or the parent, when they're talking amongst their neighbors, wants to brag that their kid went to Division I.
Yeah. I've interacted with a lot of very reasonable parents through this, so
no one thought you were going to say that.
right.
A lot of reasonable parents. Good.
Yeah.
That's a good
Now,
sign.
maybe they do a really good job of faking it in the beginning, but most of these parents have been, I'm most of the time I'm encouraging these parents to be involved because they are very reasonable. Like, hey, you need to go on the visit with your kid if you can, because you just having a presence there and you have a sound, reasonable perspective is going to be a positive thing. Yeah. So I haven't seen that a lot. I've interacted with the parent that the kid didn't want to be Division I because they wanted to have other interests and they didn't want to, and the parents didn't like hearing that from me. Sometimes I'm like the mediator, between this is what the parents want, this is what the kids want. Let's get on the same page. Let's make sure you guys understand each other. And they didn't like to hear that, but whatever, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So where their athlete goes, but yeah, no, I think it's, a lot of it is just them just being aware of the process. And part of, one of the biggest reasons I started this business is because there's a company out there that kids are paying $2,000 to $3,000 when they're sophomores in high school for a recruiting service. And I'm getting to them too late. It's like, don't do that. Like I spoke out at Reno and I had a mom come up to me and she said, I've been paying $150 a month for my freshman boy pole vaulter in high school. And she's like, after I listened to you talk, I've canceled it already. I saw her like the next day. And so luckily she was in a situation where she could cancel it, but some other ones, like they've put that money into it. And there's good things about those services. They have a database, it's easy to sort schools, so there's positives, but what they're selling is this like recruiting coaching, and most of the time, those recruiting coaches don't understand our sport. They don't understand the ins and outs, and every sport's so different that, they're just it's not worth the money, now like being in the database might be worth it. I don't know how much that costs compared to the whole big package, but yeah, so I'm trying to kind of combat that, of like, you don't have to do that if you have these resources.
Talking about those services, and I'm with you in regards to when I coached, I never use those services, no matter whether I was at the JUCO or up to the SEC, because the reason I said that was what I wondered though is, I think you either asked that question or someone else has asked that question before on Twitter, and I like to amplify questions like that to help create this discussion and conversation. And there was, I don't know if it was split 50-50, but it was certainly not 100%. 50% of the people responding said, "Oh, yeah," I'm gonna call it on Brooke's side here. No, what a waste. Like, especially in 2023 with mile split and, videos on flow track and every newspaper is online. Like I can find every stat in the world. I don't need someone's help. It takes me 2 seconds. It's going to take you 0.2 seconds when you start using ChatGPT to look up recruits. But then the other side, the other 50%, there were several coaches that said, "Oh yeah, like I've gotten several kids every year or several kids in my time frame here." So I kind of don't want to automatically poo-poo it either. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I am like, I never saw value in it, but right. I don't know.
Yeah. The same as me, unless I was like super desperate, like, hey, we need walk-on women to fill our Title IX, requirements. Like we need, so they're just, those type of scenarios. But I do think there's coaches that use it to, maybe they are at a level that they're in an AI school that's growing and developing, and they just need bodies to get their track program going. So they don't know that the kid that was 4th or 12th at the district meet wants to run track in college, right? But now that kid's on NCSA or what, recruiting service, now they know that, so I think there's value for kids that just want an opportunity anywhere. Like anywhere if you want an opportunity anywhere in the country, you can put your name in there and then coaches will reach out to you. And then those coaches that just need kids, because most of the higher level kids aren't on there. They don't need to be on there. Right. And I was just talking to a college coach the other day about going and recruiting at these bigger, state meets and the national meet, and how like they were talking about how they feel like some other coaches are better hustlers than they are, and going and talking to kids and finding kids, and they were kind of like, I just like to I more just like to really evaluate at those meets. Like, I don't want to go chase people down as much. I just want to evaluate. And it was like, yeah, you can find every kid now on social media, basically, and that's my job, is to help kids get on social media, like put your real name on there, put your school, put your class, here's a list of things you need to have so the coaches can find you.
What's your Twitter handle?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. My name is on there though. You can see
I know.
Rasnick, right.
You're on my show, Brooke. I get to poke
Right.
fun a little bit. All right.
The handle doesn't matter, it's the name.
As long as your name, I agree with that.
Right.
Yes.
But so those things, is trying to help kids understand that. And so I don't know. I think, like I said, it's interesting.
Speaking of social media, I'm going to talk for a lot of coaches right here. If you could teach recruits to do a little research before they DM someone and just say, I love your school, I'd like to run there. I haven't coached in 17 years. And I hear coaches complain about it. And I'm like, I haven't coached for 17 years. And they DM me.
Right.
I get it. I get it at least once a week. Hey, coach, love your school. Would love to run for you. And on one, I kind of, I did the funny thing. I was like, oh, what'd you like about my school? Like, was it location? Like, I love your tradition, your culture. It's like, oh, what was your what stood out to you the most? And I was like, look, man, I'm not a coach. And by the way, I'm pretty sure 99.9% of those have been boys as well. I don't know if that plays into it or not, but I just thought about that. But now, like, I don't want to ever dissuade or put down a 17, 18-year-old kid. They're kids. So I'll respond back and say, hey, I love your hustle. Like, I do like that. To me, that's the equivalent of, we've had coaches on here that have shared stories of, I wrote 400 letters to find a job. That's hustle. I love that. I don't fall in love with the medium. I don't care if it's a text, a handwritten letter, pigeon mail. To me, it's all the same. If someone reaches out, like that's what I love, right? So a kid reaching out on DM on Twitter versus emailing versus showing up at your doorstep, to me is all this, like, man, you've made effort. So I love the hustle. And I always tell them, like, I love your hustle. I love that you're reaching out. Next time, read the bio a little closer, because I'm not a coach. Right. But just do a little extra, just do one more step. But I hear some coaches that say, oh yeah, I won't respond. And I'm like, oh, I don't like that. I'm the biggest fan of coaches out there, and I can still not like some of the things that we do. I don't like that. You're still talking about 17, 18-year-old kids.
Yeah.
Kids.
Yeah.
They're kids. Their brains are still forming here. Help them out. You ain't got to write a whole book back to them. I know you're busy, but if you could just take 2 seconds, say, hey, love your hustle, kid. But, we don't even have a men's program. You're reaching out to the wrong person. Good luck to you,
Yeah.
So if you could somehow teach all recruits to just
I'm trying.
Yeah. Okay, good.
I have a free video on my website on how to reach out to coaches.
Oh, good.
So go there, watch that. So I'm trying to, that's part of this. I'm trying to make, jobs easier on coaches, make kids more accessible, help them understand, what to expect. And
make sure when you share those, and, I'm pretty much only on Twitter. That's my main jam there. Tag me like in a comment so that I see it, because I want to retweet. I want to amplify those are, I have a lot of kids actually that follow me on Twitter, athletes, high school and college athletes. So anytime, even things like that, it's like, oh, okay, that doesn't help the greater coaching body, but it does help the greater coaching body because it's educating 14, 15, 16-year-old kids. You told a great story earlier, Brooke, about when you were at Kent State and you would call a recruit and they would say, yeah, I'm looking at Louisville. And you're like, crap, I'm not getting this kid, just scratch that kid off. And then you were at Louisville and you were recruiting a kid and they would say something like Kent State and you're like, well, they're going to offer the moon. Both things can't be right. What is actually right?
Yeah. Depends on the athlete, depends on what they care about, right? Some kids, the finances are the most important thing, and it should be from where they come from. And there's other kids that, the more resources at a program is what they care about, So that's a tough thing, is like when I started this, I'm like, I don't want to do a lot of one-on-one consulting because that's in the evening time, right? That's on the weekend. Those are the times that I'm trying to spend with my kids when they're home. But it's still part of it, right? Because everyone's journey is so unique, so I'm going to try to create as much content as I can to make families feel like they don't need that, but there's still going to be families that need that because they have a really unique situation, and so yeah, it just depends. But I think the point of that story is to show that imposter syndrome that happens with college coaches.
Mm.
And so, because it's happening with the athlete and the coaches sometimes.
Mm.
And so it's to encourage the athletes, like, continue to show your interest in that school, because they may get off the phone and think, yeah, you're not that interested. And you may get off the phone thinking like you are really interested, but you don't know if they're really that interested,
Right.
and sometimes those things happen and then the communication doesn't continue. And ultimately that could have been a great fit.
Yeah. How do we, when we're recruiting, we're adults recruiting the college coach, and we got to remember, like, we got to have, in my opinion, we need to have more grace for these kids that we're recruiting. We're traditionally recruiting a 17, 18-year-old kid. I can't stress that enough. Even if you're JUCO recruiting, typically they're 20-year-old kids. They're still kids. So we got to have more grace for these kids. How do we, both sides, by the way, the athlete, the recruited athlete, and the coach, how do we be more open and honest with each other during the recruiting process? And what I mean by that is, you brought up a really good point. It depends on the kid and the parents, the situation, right? Some kids, a certain cost of a school isn't a problem, but they really want the swag then. Okay. They realize they're not going to get a half ride, quarter ride. So they want to make sure that it's a school that gives 10 shirts a year, 4 pairs of shoes, whatever, right? And that's okay. That's cool. I think that's good to know. Because if you're one of those schools, then okay, maybe I want this kid as a walk-on or books or whatever. Or if you're the opposite, if you're a school who only does 1 shirt, 1 shoes, I've been there, then don't waste your time. It's okay. Or maybe it's a kid who, comes from a disadvantaged economic area, and it's like, oh, I only go to school if I have a full ride. Like we just don't have the money. And yeah, I'd love to have shoes because I like shoes. I don't care. I need my education paid for. So, Mr. or Mrs. Coach, I need to know from the get-go. So there's a pet peeve of a coach, right? The kid that comes up and says, can you give me a full ride? I love that question. I do. That's crazy. Every coach listening right now is going, I hate that question. You got to earn yourself on the team. Yes, I get all that. But now you know that kid's situation, and you get to decide, do I move forward because you might possibly be a full ride for me? Or do I tell you, hey, I really appreciate it. I understand your situation. I would not be looking at a full ride. So let's not waste your time. Let's not waste my time. How do we get more truthful with ourselves recruiting?
Yeah, no, that's why I love international recruiting, because typically that's in the first email. This is our budget, but no, I think it's hard because sometimes now that you can talk to juniors, right? Those beginning conversations, coaches don't know what they're going to offer that athlete.
Right.
Now, they may have an idea, but maybe
Sure.
they do have this breakout junior year, or maybe their circumstances change at their school where a kid transfers and money does open up. Or so coaches are trying to keep their cards held tight, typically as long as they can, because they don't know what's going to shift, So I put it on, I did a seminar on the finances of college and these types of questions, like how do you navigate this as a recruit and as parents? And at some point, if the finances are important, like you want to have an understanding what that looks like before you go on an official visit and waste your weekend. And it's not a waste; it's still a good experience, but those are draining. And now there's unlimited official visits. A recruit can go on as many, So the timing of when to ask those questions. I mean, I called a girl the first time I called her on the phone. Within a minute, mom gets on the phone and says, "Are you going to offer my daughter a full scholarship?" Within a minute, the first phone conversation, right? And luckily that girl wasn't worth a full, she was worth 50%. So it was easy just to walk away, right? But even if she was, how that was approached to me was, okay, this mom cares way more about money than her daughter's well-being.
Okay, but Brooke, what? No, you can't assume that.
That's how it came off.
That's how you received it. I get that.
Yes, that's how I received it.
I'm going to play the other side of it. With the cost of college today, the amount of student debt, the amount of crazy, not needed student debt out there, a lot of parents are paying for their kids. By the way, my kids are probably listening at some point. I'm not paying for your college. It's not happening. You better get a job. I'm not one of those parents. I'll be like, how much you offer them? I don't care because they paying for it. So you offer what you want, coach. But knowing that they are probably going to be on the hook for some amount of money, isn't that an okay question? And did you not like knowing that on that very first phone call and not your 20th phone call?
Right. No, I think but there's got to be some tact, right? Like if the mom's going to be, she was very abrasive, right? With like, she grabbed the phone.
Okay, Brooke, don't you like that? What I mean by that is, don't you like knowing that's how mom was on the first phone call, not the 20th one?
Yeah. Then you walk away, right?
Right.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying. Sure. Not everybody is. One of the things you have to learn in sales, and that's what recruiting is. You know that better than anybody, Brooke, is not everyone is your customer. And so I'd like to know from the get-go. Same thing happens, Brooke. You call me up, Mike, how much are these pole vault poles? And I want 20 of them for free. Oh, Brooke, thanks for calling. And thanks for letting me know right off the get-go that we're not your manufacturer of multiple. You know what I'm saying?
Here's the thing though, is that parents, they aren't educated in this space well enough to know how to operate. Right? They don't understand. They think it's football, or it's either full scholarship or nothing.
Sure.
You know, so that's where they don't, they think if they go on an official visit with their kid, they're going to look like a helicopter parent. So they don't come. And and now we're kind of like, that's weird. The parents didn't come. Like they have the finances to come. Why didn't they come? You know what I mean? So that's the reality is that, like, do I want to know, like, genuinely up front, like what they care about? Like, for sure. But sometimes these parents are trying to play this game they don't understand.
Sure.
Because they're trying to set their kids up the best they can, but they don't understand. Same with coaches, right? Same with high school coaches. They're trying to navigate things to help their athletes. And in the end, they're hurting their athletes, Okay.
I agree with that. I agree that there's some coaches like that. And I agree there's some parents like that. And we won't argue on what's that percentage. Is it majority or not? Don't know. I don't believe so, but whatever. There's another party involved in this. And there's no one bigger fan of track coaches and college track coaches in this example than me. My whole life is dedicated to uplifting and honoring what coaches on all levels are doing. The impact that they make on young people, immeasurable. There's a third person in that triangle you just gave the example of, the high school coach who, whether it's ego or just want to do what's right for their kid, wants to get them to the biggest scholarship at the biggest place. There's the parent, there's the kid, by the way, involved. So maybe it's four. There's the college coach. What role does the college coach play in all of this little kerfluckle that we got going on here?
Yeah. No, it just depends on the college coach is going to play. In my perspective, the college coach is going to play at what's most advantageous for them, right? So
then why can't the parent and the kid do that?
Oh, they can, but the college coach holds all the cards. They understand the landscape. The kids and family don't yet. Once they understand the landscape, then absolutely. So that's what I'm trying to just help them with. Like, hey, I want you to understand how this really works from the other side of it. So you know how to operate. I'm not trying to get parents or kids to weasel their way into a program they're not a fit for,
Right.
But sometimes they don't understand that kid has some strengths that a college coach is really going to value, but that athlete doesn't know how to show those or doesn't realize it's a value, right? It's like the kid that says, I've been running track for 13 years. Well, that doesn't help. You know what I mean? That means you're not that good still, But the kid that's been running track for 1 year and they're at the same level athletically, you're more excited about that kid. Maybe that kid doesn't want to say I've only been doing it for 1 year because they don't realize that's a strength.
Right.
Great
point.
So yeah, but like, as a coach, right, it depends on where you're at. Like, so when I first got to Louisville and I'm trying to start a pole vault multi-program, like I'm desperate. I'm trying to get as many kids to come on a visit to show that other kids that Louisville cares about these events. Right. And so I'm doing anything, I'm hustling as much as I can, well, 3 kids in and having a group established, I'm calling a kid on the first conversation that's developmental and saying, hey, tell me about the finances, like are your parents going to help with that? Or no, it's on me. All right, man. Well, you need to stay in state. Because coming out of state isn't worth it, and then I move on, right? Where before I'm like hoping maybe they'll, spend the money to do that. Right. But I don't have the time at that point in my career, and I don't want to spend the time going through those conversations,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I think there's in what you're doing scratches what I'm about to say here. I think there's just so much education needed out there. I think there's a lot of black box stuff. I think there's a lot of ego plays into it. Again, when we talk about the high school coach, you really going to tell your kid they're not D1? I mean, some will. That's great. Those are people I have a lot of respect for because they're truthful no matter what. The moms and dads in their circles. What would you rather tell your neighbor, that your kid got a scholarship to Louisville or got a scholarship to XYZ university you've never heard of? Both, by the way, they're both going to school, so it doesn't matter what the name of it is, honestly. But there's ego in that, and same with the kid when they tell their rest of their seniors in high school, like, yeah, I'm going to University of Louisville, or I'm going to Wichita State, versus I'm going to a school you've never heard of and have no idea where it is, right? There's a lot of ego involved there, a lot of ego involved in the coaching, the college coaching side, right? Like, how many times do you read this kind of tweet? Just signed another superstar, excited for next year. I always wondered, like, well, who is that? Like, superstar is a strong word. Like, I want to know, like, 4 years from now, tell me who that superstar was and how'd they do. That's what I want to know. There's a lot of ego of, I signed the best kids, et cetera, things like that involved into it. So I think just more education can only help. Now, to close out, we're hitting our time limit here, Brooke. I want to be respectful of your time, but I do want to know, I want to go back to that phone call. Mom, 1 minute into the phone call, snatches the phone out of daughter, I don't remember if you said it was a boy or girl, daughter or son's hand, and says, you said daughter, are you going to offer my daughter a full ride? I mean, you've been 100% transparent and authentic and humble today. What was your response? Like, legit, what was your response? I know, don't tell me what was in your head, because I know that was different.
Right.
We don't have a bleep button here. What was your honest response? Are you going to give my daughter a full ride?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I responded with, man, I've been on the phone with your daughter for less than a minute, and before we make any type of offer, we want to get to know who these athletes are and if they're a right fit for our school.
And she said, yeah, maybe you didn't hear me. I said,
yeah, that was sad. It was, it was tough, and then the kid ended up going to a school that I'm sure she got a full ride at, and she got not good. I don't even think she finished her career, and you're like, dang it, Man,
Brooke, I want 2 more hours with you, because I have, I sit in this seat and I know it all now, Brooke. You're going to be there because now you're not coaching. You're going to know it all now too. But like, when you said that, and I know you probably tracked her, and it's like, oh, and you have a little bit of ego. Ego's not bad. Bad ego's bad. You have a good amount of ego here. I know you looked at her results and were like, should have came with me. I'd have made you a superstar.
I
don't know that. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I don't look at the results and think that. I look at the results of, like, man, like, I think they were chasing, like, the wrong thing. But for maybe that wasn't the wrong thing, but it was how the approach of it could have been the wrong thing.
Okay. Right? I am 100% on board with you.
I think there's absolutely kids that if they can get the most amount of scholarship money somewhere, do that. That's the best thing for your family. Go do that. Like, I lose sleep overnight of some kids that came out of state to Louisville on low scholarship money, and now they've got $100,000 in debt, and they're not making a lot of money, right. And now, did they have a great experience? Yeah, absolutely. Did they, do great things? Sure. But that's, it's tough, but
that I will be on board with you every day. That might've been the right thing. You're exactly right. It might've been. The tact mightn't have been completely incorrect. It sounds like it was incorrect. I will tell you, and you got 3 boys. First of all, God bless you. Holy cow. I've got 2, boy and a girl. And so going into 7th grade, going into 4th grade, so you start thinking about college, especially as someone who, coached in college, you probably already started to think about, man, I'd like for them to go to college if that's what's right for them. I think the cost of college has gotten so much. I think every kid should go to wherever they can get a full ride, because how many of us are going to the next level after college for track and field? Let's be real, 0. Again, a couple. There's a few every year. The majority of us aren't. Get your school paid for. I'm trying to teach my kids to play basketball, even though I hate it, because I think every Division II is still a full ride. So I'm like, man, just go ride the pine at some D2 school and get it all paid for. Be a backup point guard. It's all good, man. You'll come out of school with 0 debt and a degree. You can go make a career out of that.
Right. Yeah. Some of it. Yeah. I totally get your sentiment. But I also think there's value you're going to gain being around certain people during those 4 or 5 years that are
absolutely
better, more important than money. Right now, it's probably not more important than 200. I mean, there's some schools that are $90,000 a year now.
I know. Isn't that crazy? That's where your kids are going to go to school. You better do really well with this business.
Yeah. I'm going to get back into coaching at that point. So
it's, oh yeah, there you go. I was like, ooh, that's a bad idea. Oh yeah, that's right. Free tuition. Yeah.
No, I don't know. But no, so it's interesting. But no, I'm there's coaches out there that are listening to this that want to give me their perspective on recruiting from their levels. I'm all ears, and I'm always wanting to learn. And I am going to host a high school coaching seminar June 25th, 7:00 Eastern time. You can find it on my website, and I'm going to help just educate high school coaches, club coaches, have a Q&A at the end, and it's going to be free for those that want to attend, and just trying to help continue to educate the masses, and maybe tell their athletes that they don't need to spend $3,000 on recruiting when they're freshmen in high school.
Yeah, please don't. That's exactly right. All right. All that information is going to be down in the show notes. More than likely, you also have already seen tweets from me about that as well. But we'll have Brooke's website. We're going to wait. She's going to update her Twitter handle. I just know it. So we're going to wait, but we'll have that down in the show notes as well. But Brooke, a couple things here. One, thank you. I always grateful when someone comes and spends time with us. Again, I always say this is not an easy podcast to listen to. And what I mean by that is this ain't 20 minutes, 30 minutes. We've been going at it an hour and 50. But it's also a hard podcast to be on as a guest, because I'm sure the first time I reached out and said, hey, would you like to be a guest on the show? And I said, I need a 2-hour block. You're like, whoa, 2 hours, dude. I can't talk for 2 hours. Lo and behold, you did it. And you did a great job. So just so thankful for your time today. One. Two, just so grateful for your journey. I mean, honestly, it's very unique. I love it. I love that you were homesick 30 minutes away at Wichita State. That's real world stuff. What I mean by that is other people are going through that today, whether they're 18-year-old college freshmen or 38-year-old moms or dads, they're away from their families, etc. That's a real thing. So I appreciate your openness and frankness with that part of your story as well. And then what you're doing today. These are all nuanced conversations. There is no black and white here that it's you should be going to every school for 10%, or you should be going to every school for 100%, et cetera. Division I's better for everybody versus NAIA. These are nuanced situations, because you know what we're dealing with at the beginning and end of every day, humans, and everyone. And you've made a great points about this today and in your social media. I really do appreciate what you do, social media and content wise. We're dealing with people, and everybody's situation is different and unique, just like every school and every program is different and unique, because they're run by humans as well. The head coach, the assistant coaches, they're all humans as well, and what they have their motivations for their group as well. So I think this is a great conversation. I'm so thankful that you were open to having it. I know I pushed back on you a lot of things, but I think that's what's right for the conversation. I'm not just here to let you just sit here and nod and say, yeah, hopefully to help you and help me. You helped me. We talked about some things today that I have not thought about. We're going to have more conversations with other people about, so we can both and all learn together and grow this sport and grow this profession that means the world to me, coaching track and field. So Brooke, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your time today.
I appreciate you as well, Mike. Thanks for what you're doing for the sport and for coaches, man. So.
Always. You guys deserve it, man. You're the best. I love it. All right. Thank you for being here and listening today. Really do appreciate you. Go down. I really, we've had amazing guests here. We've talked about several of the alums that we've had here, Brooks Johnson, Cliff Rivelto, just amazing people that we've had here. But it's topics like these, and Brooke, obviously amazing coach as well. I don't want to skip past that, but what she's doing now, this is unique. And this is, there's not a lot of people doing this out there. And there's not a lot of people doing it well. And I think not only Brooke's background, but also where her heart comes from doing this, and her posture of, I'm going to learn. I want to talk. What'd she say? She already said she wanted to talk to Division II coaches, NAIA, high school coach. She wants to learn. So I just encourage you to follow this journey. Go to her website, follow her in social. She's putting out some really, maybe one of the, I'm a big content guy. So I appreciate when other people do good and a lot of content, and she's doing some really valuable content. So I highly recommend you go right now, follow her. She's a great follower there, and you'll receive a lot of value. So join us next week. We'll do it all over again, and be right back here at the Gill Track and Field Connections Podcast. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.